how did you... Was this a boyhood interest, stamps?
Not really. My sister had a company in the UK in the 70s,
okay,
dealing with a lot of different investments. Part of that company specialised in alternative investments. Doreen specialised in stamps. I came to this country in 1989 and joined the company that then moved to South Africa. Such was the interest of South Africans in alternative investments at that time. I think probably brought on by nervousness of the rand. People were worried about their money in South Africa and were looking for alternative investments.
Well, we've got the same sort of situation right now in the world where there's nervousness around the dollar.
Yeah.
Are you finding people ploughing money into things like stamps? I know there's been a lot of interest in gold in the last sort of month or two.
Yes.
Are you people finding that similar sort of interest?
Yes, Jeremy, we are. We're finding, I think people are quite nervous about the more traditional investments. Their volatility, that always leads people towards things like gold historically. Stamps is in the same asset class. Stamps, we find that people are attracted to stamps not only for their investment, but obviously because of the interest and the pleasure that people can gain from stamps. That's historically where stamp collecting started. More recently, stamps have become seen as an investment as they've been rated by different agencies, including Salomon Brothers in America, who look at all sort of asset classes and rate investments. We found that people are being attracted to stamps as an investment, purely because I think the more modern investor, if you like, is taking more responsibility for his investments going forward, rather than just, you know, in the old days we were told by our father, you know, give 10% of your salary away to a stockbroker or a unit trust manager. We find that more modern investors are taking more responsibility for their own destiny.
Well, you have to really, because and that's where this show, why this show came about, because there are a lot of people like me who don't understand the bigger picture in business, but we have money to invest and we want to create wealth, so we're interested in it. There are a lot of those people around. Now, how do you get to them and convince them to start buying this particular asset class, as in stamps? That must be fairly difficult to do.
Yes, we rely a lot on word of mouth. We do advertising. We're currently doing an advertising project with American Express, whereby we like to offer investors the opportunity to get involved in stamps in a safe way, because you know, there's a lot to learn, obviously, about investment in stamps, and someone like yourself obviously would come in completely cold, other than a possible interest in the investment angle, which we would attract you by saying, well, these are the returns that one can expect at different levels of investment. What we try and do as a company is we try and hold the hand of the new investor in terms of advising him what sort of stamps he should be buying, in what condition. You know, there are a lot of variables, like with art, that one needs to learn, but we try and hold the investor's hand in order to enable him to be exposed to this type of investment safely.
Okay, we'll come back to the returns in a moment, but is there a form, because I can understand this could be a risky business. If you don't know what you're doing,
yes,
you could get very badly burnt.
Yes.
It's almost like trying to cherry pick stocks, which is also a very
yes,
dangerous thing to do. Is there a sort of, I don't know,
you see,
a unit trust of stamps, if you know what I mean?
Not really. What we try and do, we're constantly trying to identify areas of philately that we feel are going to offer investors maximum returns. So we're looking at, for example, at the moment we're more and more putting clients into an area of philately in eras in the Queen Elizabeth period of philately, where we're looking at rarity on the one hand, and we're looking at the demand on the other, and that's what actually gives the stamp its price. So in other words, supply and demand. So the supply of stamps is finite. You know, they're not making any more stamps. If you're collecting a certain area of stamps, that supply is finite. The demand issue, what we try and do is identify areas of philately where collectors are attracted to. So, for example, Great Britain stamps, that's the most popular country collected. So we will try and identify areas on behalf of the client where within that field, the rarity and the price are not matched.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, if you have a stamp that's one of 10, that's priced at a level of, say, £5,000, we may feel that that's undervalued in terms of the rarity. So we would feel very comfortable to put a client into that.
The changes that are happening technologically around the world, with people moving towards Skype, emails, that sort of method of communication, do you see stamps becoming more rare because less are printed, because the demand for the usage of them, and I'm talking about the present day ones, is not there anymore?
Interestingly enough, the internet for us has actually been fantastic for stamps, because it's afforded, so I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, but talking about technological impact, the internet has been fantastic for stamps in general for the buyer, because you can buy a stamp in Hong Kong in the morning and a stamp in South Africa in the afternoon. It's enabled it's afforded the collector the option of now buying stamps all over the world, as opposed to from his local dealer down the road.
Right.
So we've actually embraced that. Most stamp dealers have websites now offering stock. So it's actually enhanced the collectability of stamps, you know, and made a collector's life far easier.
No, but I think the point I was trying to make is, in the future, are we still
will stamp production stop?
We're going to have stamps, yeah.
I don't think so, because there's an enormous amount of what we call the new issue collector. So, you know, there's a dividing line between a collector and an investor. So a collector is somebody who rushes off to the post office when the new stamps come out.
Buys the first day cover?
First day cover.
Yes, I remember those.
He buys the new issues.
Yeah.
And that is enormous. The demand for that is enormous globally. And the post offices, of course, are making a fortune out of that. So I don't believe that'll ever stop. More for my clients and the stamps that we focus on, being the investment stamps, that doesn't really apply. So in answer to your question directly, I don't think stamp production will stop, no.
I suppose we're sort of out of the loop here in South Africa, because there's not as much postal work done here as there is overseas. I was chatting a while back with a guy who works for Netcare in the UK. He runs, and I wasn't even aware of this. I mean, how's this for a fact? South African company, Netcare, virtually runs the national health system of the UK. And he's one of the senior guys there. And he said, it's such a pleasure, because if they have a client who is on chronic medication and they need that medication, he said, you know, you can put it in first-class post and they've got it the same day.
Yes.
And I just thought to myself, can you imagine in South Africa, you've got somebody who could die if they don't get their medication, and you you would never even think of putting it in the post to get them there.
But interestingly enough,
it is very different.
I mean, stamps were born on the 6th of May 1840 with the penny black. Now, the penny black, everybody knows the penny black as it's the most famous stamp. The misnomer about the penny black, I think, is that people also think it's the rarest and most valuable stamp that was ever produced.
You're kidding, I thought it was.
No, well, in fact, it was brought out together with a letter sheet. Now, the letter sheet, similar to an aerogram letter that we use today, or not, as the case may be, came out at the same time as the penny black, which was referred to in those days as a label. It wasn't even called a stamp. Now, the penny black, they never thought the penny black was going to work. They focused their attention on these prepaid letter sheets, where you would obviously write your letter inside, fold it up, seal it with your ring, and then send it. Now, the penny black was only out for a year. For 1 year, 1840, because the cost of production was huge, because they were printing penny blacks using copper plates, which of course are very soft. But the demand for the penny black was enormous, unanticipated, as I say. So after a year, they canned it. But in that 1 year, they printed 67 million penny blacks.
Wow.
Now, that's an enormous number, because first of all, the population of the UK was a fraction of what it is today.
Right.
Secondly, the number of people that could read and write in those days was tiny. So often it would sort of, the address on the front of an envelope that survived today with a penny black on would simply say, Jeremy, Mansfield, London. And it would find its way to you. Now, some of those are quite valuable because of the usage, you know, obviously the early usage. The most valuable ones are the first day covers, of course. So if you've got an envelope with a penny black on, that was posted on the 6th of May. It's worth an absolute fortune.
When you say an absolute fortune,
well, upwards of £100,000.
Wow.
Yes. So, but the penny black is a fascinating stamp to everybody, because even if you're collecting China or France or your thematics, you know, you get thematic collectors who might collect ships on stamps or butterflies on stamps. Those are the collectors. Everybody wants a penny black. Now, as I say, to go back, penny blacks, some of them are very valuable, some of them aren't. But everybody knows the penny black. And I love the penny black because, of course, it's one of the most beautiful stamps ever produced. But beyond that, stamp production changed. Now, going back to what makes stamps valuable, the penny black, there were 67 million printed in 1 year. Consequently, a lot have survived today. So simple supply and demand.
Yeah.
Although it was the first and is the oldest stamp in the world, there are still a lot around today.
What is the least printed stamp? Do you know?
Jeremy, there are many. There are many stamps that are unique. The world's most valuable stamp is a Swedish stamp called the Trace Skilling Yellow, which was supposed to have been printed in green and was actually printed in yellow. Now that stamp was found in a schoolboy's collection. And has recently, I believe, changed hands for an undisclosed sum, but it was upwards of €2 million for a single stamp. The problem is that's a unique stamp. Now in my stock, I've got, for example, something that's unique at the moment, nowhere near that price. So I think a lot of that with the Trace Skilling Yellow has been created in terms of glamour, in terms of marketing. You know, that's something for me, for an investor, I'd probably stay away from, because I'd rather go to the nuts and bolts of what I do, rarity, in other words, supply and demand of what are we looking at. Because the other thing is you've got to also focus on what are people collecting.
Well, that's what I wanted to get to. What are people wanting in their collections, and what are they actually buying? Graham Royan is our guest in the studio this evening. He's the MD of Doreen Royan and Associates. We're talking stamp collecting as an investment. We'll be back in just a moment.